Hi, welcome back. I am finally getting around to talking about Samantha Ravindal's new line. It's called Auric, and as soon as I saw the products in this launch, and as soon as a lot of you all saw the products, I got several messages and DMs because there is a full cream eyeshadow lineup, and we know that cream eyeshadow is the name of the game here on my channel. I pretty much exclusively only use cream eyeshadows. So if you aren't familiar with Samantha, I'm just going to leave her channel down below. She's been making videos for probably the same amount of time that I have, and I've always enjoyed her content. So I was excited for this launch. So within her makeup launch, she came out with basically a multi-purpose product called Glow Lust. This is called a radiant luminizer, and you can use it in a few different ways. I'm going to briefly talk about this, but I really want to focus on the cream eyeshadows. These are cream eyeshadow duos. So in the bottom, you take the little cap off. In the bottom, you have a cream eyeshadow. And then on the top, if you flip the top up, you have an actual pressed kind of glitter pigment going on. So really two eyeshadows in one kind of vibe going on. Definitely would consider these little guys to be like a one and done quick eyeshadow style look. And I have been wearing these products for a week now. I like to test things before I get on camera and blab about them. So I've been wearing all of this for a week, and we're just gonna jump right into it. So like I said, I briefly wanna go over the Glow Lust. This is basically a multi-purpose product. You can use it underneath your makeup. You can mix it with your moisturizer. You can mix it with your foundation, or you can use it on top of your makeup as a highlighter. So this is heavily compared to Charlotte Tilbury's Hollywood Flawless Filter. Even Samantha herself says that the formulas are similar. And basically this, the Hollywood Flawless Filter, this is one of my favorite products from Charlotte Tilbury. I generally just use it on my cheeks. I'm actually wearing it today on my cheeks. And in comparison to the Auric formula, I find that there are a couple differences. If you were to put these formulas side by side and feel the texture, you would definitely notice that Hollywood Flawless Filter is much thinner in texture. The Auric one runs on the thicker side. You'll notice that when you pump it out, it has a bit more of this moussey consistency, whereas Flawless Filter is definitely more on the liquid side. Just like Hollywood Flawless Filter, the Auric Glow Lust comes in multiple shades. I got the shade Selenite, and when I say shades, that's a very like loose term. They basically just come in different undertones. Don't get this mixed up with an actual foundation. I got the shade Selenite, which is the second darkest color, and I do feel like the Auric formula almost comes off a little bit more foundation like on the skin because it has that thicker texture. And I also feel like it has a little bit more pigment in it to where when I apply it to my bare skin, I almost get like a slight tint or foundation appearance. And I personally like that because I wasn't thinking that I was gonna like this underneath my makeup because I never wear Hollywood Flawless Filter underneath my makeup. I much prefer it on top of my skin. So that was a nice surprise. I do like wearing this by itself, and I could see a lot of people liking this as almost like their foundation and then just adding a little bit of concealer on top. It would definitely give you a super natural finish, although you would have to really appreciate a glow because this is a very glowy product. So overall, I see myself using this in a very similar fashion as Hollywood Flawless Filter. I've been using the Auric as a primer or a base underneath my makeup, or I mix a little bit in with my moisturizer, and then I would use Hollywood Flawless Filter on top. I don't love the Auric one on top. The formula is a little bit too thick for my preference, but again, that's a preference thing. So overall on this guy right here, really no complaints because it is very similar to one of my favorite products of all time, which is Hollywood Flawless Filter. So if you're interested in a very healthy glow product that's gonna last you, this will probably last. I don't see myself like ever running out of this. If you like a glow, if you like multi-purpose things that you can mix, I think you will end up liking this product. If primers, glowy bases, mix-ins aren't your jam, it's probably not going to be for you. Okay, let's get into these cream eyeshadows. As of right now, there are currently 3 shades. I did purchase all of the shades. We have Ego, Temper, and Defiance. So these are $39, I believe, and you do get technically 2 eyeshadows in a pot because underneath you have your cream, and then on top you have your little pressed pigment, and you also have a tiny little mirror, which I appreciated because I feel like that was probably an added cost. People always talk about how expensive it is to put mirrors in things, but I found that the mirror for me has come in handy almost every single time I've used these, so do appreciate that. I'm gonna have to break these down by shades because I have felt that each shade has kind of performed a little bit differently on me. So I want to talk about the color that I first used, and you guys are going to see me use this in an actual tutorial. I think for next week's video, I did a no brush makeup tutorial where I literally just used my hands for everything, and I thought these guys would be perfect because you can very easily just apply these with your finger. So Defiance was the first full-on time that I had used both the cream and the pigment together. One day I just randomly opened up actually the shade that I'm wearing right now, which is the Temper Duo, and I used the pressed pigment in it on top of a caviar stick, and I noticed that the pressed pigment in the Temper Duo, it was very, very tightly packed. The glitter reflex were pretty sheer when I pat them into my eyes because the pigment was definitely just packed super tight. So to my surprise, when I used the Defiance Duo, I found that the gold pressed pigment in this one was definitely less tightly packed. I got more payoff just with a softer touch or a softer application to the product, and when I pressed into my eye, I felt like there was definitely a lot more payoff than the previous shade in the Temper Duo. However, still a pretty tightly packed pigment, and I found that in all 3, and it could just be like a random inconsistency thing, but I do feel like each of the 3 that I have are packed at like different strengths, if that makes sense. So I want to compare these. The closest thing I can compare these to that I have in my collection is the Bodyography pressed glitter pigments that you all see me use all the time. I absolutely love those, and again, this could be a preference thing, but those are very softly packed pigments, and I really like that because I just feel like I use less product. I feel like I'm not damaging the product when I go to press my finger in. With the Auric ones, especially that Temper Duo, I think you can even like compare the difference at how hard I've pressed on these. I'll do a better close-up shot so you can see the difference in how I've worn these. You can see that the Temper, little Temper Duo, it has been pressed on pretty significantly so I can get the pigment out, whereas my Defiance Duo, not so much because I didn't feel like it was as tightly packed. So yeah, I love my Bodyography pigments because they are just really creamy and soft, opaque, and one tiny tap to the eye, you get full on pigment with. With the Auric formula, I do feel like she was going for a little bit more of a sheer glitter pigment. I don't feel like that was the vibe that they were probably going for when they were designing these pigments. So that's probably why they are tightly packed. Also, the way the packaging is, you know, you have this really slim disc on the inside, so you can't really risk having like a softer pressed product on top in such a tightly packed space, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I guess I do understand why these are packed on the tighter side. It doesn't change my preference that I still prefer a slightly less packed pigment. Okay, I've kind of abandoned the final shade, which is called Ego, and it's a lovely kind of like a seafoam color, like a seafoam green. I do pick up on like a slight duochrome. It's like this mint mixed with silver, very gorgeous color. This one is definitely the softest out of the 3 that I own. I feel like with this one, I barely need to rub my finger to get like a full opacity. It is not as sheer as the other two pigments. So that's a big difference I found in this particular shade. And I loved applying this on top of the cream because I just feel like it was so easy. I didn't have to put a ton of effort into it. And again, I think that just comes with me preferring that type of formula. But yeah, so if I were to do a comparison on the softness and the opacity of each of these shades, so Temper, to me, the glitter pigment in Temper, definitely the sheerest, at least in the formulas that I have and that I own. Next up would be Defiance, and then Ego. I felt Ego had the most opacity to it, the softest formula, and the most payoff when I pressed into my lid upon first application. Okay, let's get into the fun part. I want to break down the cream formula in each of these shadows, and just like I had a different experience with the pressed pigments that come on top, I feel like each color I had a different experience with in the cream formula as well. Speaking of cream formula, I want to break this down for you. There are multiple formulas, in my opinion, when referring to a cream eyeshadow, and these are a moussey formula to me. These are so similar to Charlotte Tilbury's Eyes to Mesmerize. And when I say that I think creams have different formulas, let's take like Laura Mercier Caviar Stick, for example. That is more of a solidified formula. A Maybelline Color Tattoo, again, a solidified formula. A MAC Paint Pot. Those are all a little bit more dense in texture. Then we have kind of like the L'Oreal Brilliant Eyes that I talk about. Those are a little bit more of a liquid texture. And then we have shadows like these. And like I said, very similar to Charlotte Tilbury's Eyes to Mesmerize. They're moussey. They aren't fully liquid, but they aren't as solid or as dense as something like a MAC Paint Pot. So just to clarify, if you were unsure what the texture were on these, it's very comparable to a mousse. I just want to cut straight to the chase on how I have found that these apply best on me. Oftentimes with a caviar stick, I recommend layering in very sheer layers until you have built up to your preference. That is not the way I would recommend applying these. I tried applying Defiance that way the first day that I used it. I was just picking up really small amounts with my finger and trying to gradually build up. Did not work out for me in the slightest. I actually had some creasing really quick by doing that. I just remember thinking to myself, oh damn, like this is not the formula I was expecting. However, the best way that I can recommend applying these is actually getting a significant amount of product on the back of your finger and applying a decent layer as your first layer, blending out those edges, and then if you feel like you need more, I found that I can go in a second time without much or many issues at all in regards to like creasing or application issues, and I build up that way, but I don't exceed 2 layers with these shadows. Definitely you need to pick up a substantial amount of product, work with that first, and then I would not go past applying a second layer. It's just too much. They don't look fresh. They just will start looking a little muddled, and you probably will experience creasing. So my favorite cream formula that I've tried is actually the one that I'm wearing today. I'm wearing Temper, and the shade in it is still very much bronzy like Defiance, but it almost has a hint of like a rose gold undertone to it. It's not as warm. It's not as like true bronze, if that makes sense. It has a little bit of a pinky undertone to it. I have found that this one applies in layers best out of the 3 shades that I own. I would say second best application goes to Ego. I was really expecting this one to perform a little bit more on the complicated side just because it is a darker color. It has a darker pigment to it, but actually really no issues applying it. I found that I needed very little product. Again, I did like a 2-layer building system, and I found that it applied pretty easily. And then lastly, Defiance. Again, I've only worn this one once, and I was applying it in very sheer layers. Wasn't crazy about the way that it turned out. So definitely, I think if I go back and I apply a little bit more, like a substantial amount of product upon first application, I'll probably have a little bit of better results with it. But as far as performance, that's kind of how I would rank these in terms of application, in terms of layerability, if that's even a word. Basically, how well they layer on top of one another, how well you can layer the product, and then just overall performance. That's kind of how I would rank my experience in the creams. Oh yeah, longevity. That's one thing I've not had an issue with any of these shades. I find that by the end of the day, they pretty much look the same as when I applied them first thing. So that's a huge bonus. Props to formulation on that. Cream eyeshadows can definitely be tricky in that arena, but yeah, zero issues on longevity. Okay, final conclusion, because I've rambled on long enough. I know people are going to say, well, are these going to replace your caviar sticks? Are they going to replace, your Charlotte Tilbury Eyes to Mesmerize? I wouldn't say that thus far, just from what I have tried. I will say that for a travel standpoint, very convenient. If I want to do like a quick reflective look and don't want to put any effort into it, then I would definitely reach for this, because it's very minimal effort. You do get a pretty high impact as far as your finished product goes. I think the biggest thing for me is the shades that are available right now. Not necessarily like 100% my favorite. Like I said, Temper is the one that I like best shade-wise. However, the pigment in Temper is my least favorite, like the little top press pigment. I much prefer the pigment in the Ego and the Defiance duos. But then I'm not crazy about the cream shadow in the Defiance duo, so I will definitely be mixing and matching on these. But overall, I know price was a big issue for a lot of you, and especially if you're Canadian, because from what I understood, the shipping was more expensive in Canada, which I know that's where she's from, but I'm assuming my product shipped from California. So I'm assuming that that's why shipping was cheaper for me, because my shipping was only $8. So you pay, 39 bucks for this and then add 15 on top. Looking at like what, $54, $55 product. And I got a lot of messages from you all being like, I just could not pull the trigger. And I fully understand. My order total was $170 for 4 products. And that's a lot, baby. Trust me when I say that if I did not review makeup for a living, I would have probably purchased maybe 2 of these products. And I can't help but to think that a lot of that pricing is also coming from packaging, because this is pretty significant packaging. I mean, it is substantial, it's sturdy. You can definitely feel that they've probably put a little bit more into the packaging than what a lot of companies or brands do. So in finishing, I just want to say that if this were my specific like tailored formula, if I could just make like some slight improvements for my preference, again, my personal preference, I definitely would love to see a little bit more of a soft, buttery feel in the pressed pigments. And then I don't mind the mousse, the moussey texture. I do feel like it is slightly harder to work with. And again, that's a preference thing coming from me, because we know I live and die by a good stick eyeshadow, cream eyeshadow. Truly, I would say the only thing is a little bit more of a buttery soft pigment in this top part. That's a preference thing. I would much prefer to very lightly have to tap and then get a better payoff, as opposed to rubbing harder, because at the end of the day, I feel like that's going to disturb my pan just as much as having like maybe a softer packed product. But again, I don't work in product development. I don't know how that works. There's probably a reason that those are more tightly packed. I would love to know how these products have been performing for you if you decided to splurge on them. And yeah, I guess I will see you in the next video, where you should be able to see Defiance in better action. So yeah, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.